The story begins with a young boxer named Jung. At just 16 years old, he was already a local celebrity, thanks to his remarkable boxing skills. One evening, after winning a major match, Jung hurried home, excited to see his mother and sister, who were waiting for him. However, instead of the joyful reunion he expected, he walked into a horrifying scene. His mother and sister were lying lifeless. While he stood in shock, a man suddenly attacked him from behind. But Jung, being a skilled boxer, fought back quickly and managed to kill the attacker. Fast forward 2 years, a group of boys in a school somewhere in town were talking about Jung's story. They had heard that the people who attacked his family were thieves and that Jung had defeated them all with his bare hands. Unfortunately, despite acting in self-defense, Jung was charged with murder and sent to prison. Among the boys listening was Subin, a new student who had recently transferred to escape bullying at his previous school. Subin was starting to settle into his new environment when the teacher introduced a new student to the class, Tony. Subin froze when he saw him. Tony was not only a boxer but also one of the bullies who had tormented Subin at his old school. Seeing Tony again brought back all the fear Subin thought he had left behind. As soon as the teacher left the classroom, Tony wasted no time establishing dominance. He started picking on and beating some kids without any reason, making it clear that he was in charge. Eventually, Tony turned his attention to Subin. Too frightened to stand up for himself, Subin stayed silent. When one of Subin's friends stepped in to protect him, Tony shoved the girl aside and even raised his hand to slap her. At that moment, Subin found the courage to stop him. However, Tony only became angrier and prepared to beat Subin. Panicked, Subin grabbed a pen to defend himself, but Tony mocked him, daring him to use it. In a desperate attempt to escape Tony's grip, Subin stabbed the pen into Tony's eye. Subin was later charged with attempted murder. But when it came time to testify in court, Subin couldn't bring himself to speak against Tony, and as a result, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. On the bus ride to the prison, Subin found himself sitting next to none other than Jung, the infamous boxer. Once they arrived, the inmates were divided into cells. Subin was placed with a thief named Min, and the two quickly became friends. It wasn't long before Subin learned about the power structure within the prison. There were 3 influential prisoners who ruled the place: Jun, Akio, and Han. Jun was the most reasonable of the 3, often stepping in to stop Akio and Han from bullying others. But Akio and Han had recently set a trap for Jun, leading the guards to place him in solitary confinement. With Jun out of the way, Akio and Han freely terrorized the inmates. However, the most feared prisoner was still Jung, though he only fought when he felt it was justified. The next day, Subin and Min watched a football match involving Akio and Han. 2 players got injured, so Han called Subin and Min over to join his team. Subin, nervous about his lack of football skills, agreed reluctantly. As a result, Han's team started losing, and Subin hesitated to take responsibility. Frustrated, Subin kicked the ball with his eyes closed, and it accidentally hit Akio, causing him to fall in pain. Furious, Akio's friends dragged Subin toward their cell. Terrified, Subin begged for mercy, but his pleas were ignored. Just then, Jung walked by. Instantly, Akio's group changed their behavior, pretending to be friends with Subin. Realizing that everyone in prison respected Jung, Subin ran to him for help. Despite usually avoiding unnecessary conflict, Jung couldn't ignore Subin's desperate cries and quickly knocked Akio down with a single punch. In prison, lessons were held for inmates, but Akio's glare remained fixed on Subin, signaling his intent for revenge. After class, Subin was unexpectedly taken to meet someone, Tony. One of Tony's eyes was severely damaged from their previous encounter, and he had been expelled from school. Living on the streets, Tony blamed Subin for his misfortunes and was determined to kill him. As Tony confronted Subin, he begged for his life, but Tony ignored him. Subin then noticed Jung training nearby. At that moment, Subin realized that if he wanted to survive his remaining 2 years in prison, he needed to learn boxing. He approached Jung, asking him to be his trainer. Initially, Jung refused, suspecting Subin might exploit his skills. But after hearing Subin's story and seeing his sincerity, Jung decided to give him a chance. However, Jung set a test. Subin had to run 100 laps around the training ground in under 40 minutes. Determined to survive, Subin pushed himself beyond exhaustion. As he neared his breaking point, Jung saw his determination and agreed to train him. From the next day, Subin began his boxing lessons. Despite his weakness, Jung pushed him hard, reminding him that his survival depended on his dedication. Meanwhile, Akio and his gang plotted to separate Subin from Jung by targeting Min. Subin continued training tirelessly, and over time, his body began to transform. During this period, he and Jung formed a strong friendship. Outside the prison, Tony's reputation as a fighter grew. One day, a notorious gangster offered him a job, but Tony initially refused and insulted him. The gangster knocked Tony out, eventually forcing him to agree to work for him. Back in prison, Subin learned from Min that Jung would soon be transferred to another prison. Feeling abandoned, Subin confronted Jung, who explained that Subin needed to learn to stand on his own. Motivated, Subin threw himself back into training. One day, Akio's gang harassed Min, prompting Subin to intervene. Using his newfound boxing skills, Subin defeated them. Akio ordered his goons to bring Subin to him, but they were now too scared to fight him. Subin eventually faced Akio himself. Apologizing for their past issues, Subin tried to avoid a fight, but Akio attacked him. Though Akio was stronger, Subin held his ground, and the fight ended when Jung intervened. As Jung's transfer day approached, Subin continued training, and Han challenged him to a fight, promising to stop bullying if he lost. On the day of the fight, Subin defeated Han, ending the bullying in prison. 2 years later, when Subin was released, he faced Tony in a rematch. Using Jung's teachings, Subin defeated Tony with a decisive punch. Subin walked away quietly, knowing he had grown stronger and that his bond with Jung remained unbroken.